April of 1943. The English Midlands. The world is at war, and the ancient Hagley Wood, a dense, tangled stretch of forest on the grounds of the Hagley Hall estate in Worcestershire, stands quiet and dark beneath a canopy of oak, beech, and elm. 4 boys from the nearby town of Stourbridge have slipped through the estate's boundary fence to go poaching. They are looking for birds' nests and rabbits, the usual countryside mischief of wartime adolescence. One of the boys, a teenager named Bob Farmer, spots a large wych elm tree standing slightly apart from the others. Its trunk is thick and gnarled, and there is a hollow opening near the top. Thinking a bird or an owl might be nesting inside, he climbs up and reaches his hand down into the dark cavity of the trunk. His fingers close around something smooth, round, and hard. He pulls it upward into the light. He is holding a human skull. It stares back at him from empty sockets, a few remaining teeth still set in the jaw. The boys drop from the tree in a panic and scatter through the woods. They make a pact of silence. They are trespassing, after all. But the horror of what they have found is too much for the youngest boy, Tommy Willits. Within days, he tells his parents, and the police are called to Hagley Wood. What they find inside the wych elm tree will launch one of the strangest and most enduring mysteries in British criminal history. When officers from the Worcestershire County Police arrived at the wych elm, they carefully extracted the remains from inside the hollow trunk. What they found was deeply disturbing. The skeleton of a woman had been wedged into the tree, placed there almost certainly at or very near the time of her death. The position of the body suggested she had been pushed in head first, while the flesh was still on her bones. The opening of the trunk was far too narrow for a fully decomposed skeleton to have been inserted afterward. Along with the skeleton, investigators recovered a gold wedding ring, fragments of clothing including a blue crepe-soled shoe, and remnants of taffeta fabric. A section of fabric had been stuffed deep into her mouth. Near the tree, scattered among the roots and undergrowth, police found skeletal hand bones. Her hand had been severed and buried separately from the body. Professor James Webster, the foremost forensic pathologist in the region, examined the remains at the University of Birmingham. He determined that the woman had been dead for approximately 18 months, placing her death in late 1941. She was roughly 35 years old, about 5 feet tall, and had given birth at least once. Her dental work was distinctive but unmatched to any known records. The cause of death was asphyxiation. The taffeta stuffed into her mouth had killed her. Whoever she was, she had been murdered, and someone had hidden her body inside a living tree. The investigation that followed was extensive but frustrating at every turn. Worcestershire police checked every missing persons report in the region. They examined dental records from across the country. They published descriptions of the clothing, the wedding ring, and the distinctive shoes in newspapers and police bulletins. They contacted military authorities. Wartime England was full of displaced persons, refugees, and transient workers who might have slipped through the cracks of normal record-keeping. Nothing matched. Nobody claimed her. In a country keeping meticulous wartime records of rationing, identity cards, and population movements, this woman appeared to exist in no official record at all. She was a ghost even before she died. The severed hand added another layer of darkness to the case. Professor Webster confirmed that it had been cut from the body deliberately, not torn away by animals. In some interpretations, the removal of a hand carried occult significance. The so-called Hand of Glory, an artifact from European folklore believed to grant its possessor supernatural powers when prepared from the hand of a murder victim. Whether the killer believed in such things or whether the hand was removed for entirely different reasons remains unknown. But the suggestion of ritualistic violence hung over the case from the very beginning, and it has never fully dissipated. And then came the graffiti. In late 1943, just months after the discovery of the body, strange writing began appearing on walls, buildings, and monuments across the West Midlands. Scrawled in white paint or chalk, always in block capital letters, the message read, Who put Bella in the Wych Elm? Sometimes the phrasing varied slightly. Who put Bella down the Wych Elm? Who put Luabella down the Wych Elm? But the core message was always the same. Someone out there knew this woman's name. Someone was asking a question they seemed to already know the answer to, or perhaps they were taunting the police, or taunting themselves. The graffiti appeared on a war memorial, on the side of a pub, on a stone obelisk near Hagley. It appeared in places where it would be seen by the maximum number of people, and it kept appearing, year after year, decade after decade. New instances of the message have been documented as recently as the 21st century, nearly 80 years after the body was found. Nobody has ever been caught writing it. Nobody has ever come forward to explain how they knew the name Bella, or what connection they had to the dead woman in the tree. The graffiti transformed an already bizarre murder case into something almost mythological, a riddle painted onto the landscape itself, demanding an answer that nobody could provide. Over the decades, investigators and amateur researchers have proposed a number of theories about the identity of the woman in the Wych Elm. The most persistent and perhaps most credible theory emerged in 1953 when a journalist named Wilfred Byford Jones published a series of articles claiming that a woman had contacted him with information about the case. She told him that the victim was a Dutch woman named Clarabella Dronkers, called Bella, who had been part of a Nazi spy ring operating in the English Midlands during the war. According to this account, Bella had been working with a network of German agents who were using local music halls and entertainment venues as covers for espionage activities. When Bella either threatened to expose the ring or was suspected of becoming unreliable, she was murdered by her fellow agents and her body was hidden in the Wych Elm to prevent discovery. The spy ring theory gained traction because of the wartime context. The Midlands were home to critical war industries, munitions factories, aircraft production plants, and military installations. German intelligence was known to have targeted the region, and the fact that the victim carried no identification and appeared in no British records was consistent with someone operating under a false identity. But no definitive proof of a spy connection has ever been established, and the theory remains exactly that, a theory. A second major theory focused on a woman named Una Mossop. In 1953, the same year the spy theory surfaced, a woman named Una Hainsworth came forward and told police that her former husband, Jack Mossop, had confessed to her years earlier that he and a man named Van Ralt had killed a woman and stuffed her body inside a hollow tree. According to Una, Jack had been deeply disturbed by what he had done and had suffered terrible nightmares about a woman's face staring at him from inside a tree. Jack Mossop had been committed to a mental institution in 1941, right around the time Professor Webster estimated the murder had occurred. He died in the institution in 1942, never having been formally questioned about the case. Police investigated the lead but were never able to locate anyone named Van Ralt, and the corroborating evidence was thin. Una's account was second-hand, drawn from the fragmented confessions of a man descending into mental illness. Still, the details were unsettling. The timeline matched. The imagery of Mossop's nightmares, a woman's face in a tree, was disturbingly specific, and the fact that he was institutionalized and died just months after the estimated time of the murder left open the possibility that guilt, rather than illness alone, had destroyed his mind. A third theory, which has gained more attention in recent years, connects the Wych Elm case to the broader world of witchcraft and folk magic that persisted in rural England well into the 20th century. The severed hand, the taffeta stuffed into the mouth, the body placed inside a living tree. To some researchers, these details form a recognizable pattern, elements of a ritualistic killing drawn from centuries-old traditions of English folk sorcery. The Hand of Glory tradition held that a candle made from the fat of a hanged criminal, placed in the hand of a dead person, would render the holder invisible or cause all those who slept in a house to remain unconscious. The practice of placing objects in the mouths of the dead was associated with preventing the spirit from speaking or cursing the living. And trees particularly hollow trees, had long been associated in English folklore with boundaries between the living world and the world of the dead. Hagley Wood itself sat on land with deep historical connections to folk magic and pre-Christian tradition. The nearby Clent Hills had been sites of pagan worship for centuries. Whether the killing was genuinely motivated by occult belief, or whether the killer simply staged the scene to suggest ritual murder and confuse investigators, the symbolism was unmistakable. Someone either believed in the power of these acts or wanted others to believe they did. The case has been formally reopened and reviewed multiple times over the decades, but each effort has ended in the same frustrating impasse. In 2016, the Staffordshire and West Midlands Forensic Science Society undertook a comprehensive review of all surviving evidence. They applied modern forensic techniques to photographs and measurements taken in 1943. They re-examined the dental records, the clothing fragments, and the physical characteristics documented by Professor Webster. The results were illuminating in their precision. They could describe the victim in remarkable detail, but they could not name her. Advanced isotope analysis of the remaining bone samples might have revealed where the woman grew up, based on the mineral content of the water she drank as a child. DNA analysis might have connected her to living relatives, but the crucial physical evidence, the skeleton itself, has been lost. Sometime between the original investigation and the modern reviews, the remains disappeared from police custody. No one knows when. No one knows how. The bones of the woman in the Wych Elm have vanished as completely as her identity. The single most important piece of evidence in the case simply no longer exists. Bob Farmer, the boy who first reached into that tree and pulled out a human skull, lived with the memory for the rest of his life. He gave interviews decades later, describing the moment in vivid, undiminished detail. The feel of the smooth bone beneath his fingers, the shock of recognition when he realized what he was holding, the nightmares that followed for years afterward. The other boys who were there that day carried the experience differently, but none of them forgot it. Tommy Willits, the youngest, who broke the pact of silence and told his parents, "His decision to speak is the only reason we know about the woman in the tree at all." If those 4 boys had kept their secret, the Wych Elm would have eventually died and fallen, and whatever remained of the skeleton would have been scattered by animals and weather and time. She would have disappeared completely, as though she had never existed. Instead, she became one of the most haunting unsolved cases in British history. A woman with no name, no identity, no past that anyone can trace. Murdered and hidden inside a living tree in the middle of a world war, found by children who were looking for bird nests. And then, impossibly, someone began writing her name on walls across the countryside, turning her anonymous death into a public riddle that has endured for 80 years. The Wych Elm where the body was found was eventually cut down. Some accounts say by the estate's groundskeepers, others say it simply fell from age and rot. The stump may still be there, somewhere in the undergrowth of Hagley Wood, but no marker identifies the spot. The graffiti, however, continues. As recently as 2018, fresh instances of the message have appeared. Who put Bella in the Wych Elm? Sprayed on bridges, walls, and buildings in the West Midlands. Someone is still asking the question. Or perhaps multiple people now carrying forward a tradition they may not even fully understand. The woman herself remains unknown. Was she Bella? Was she Clarabella? Was she a spy? A victim of domestic violence? A sacrifice to folk magic? Or simply a vulnerable woman in wartime England who crossed paths with the wrong person? We do not know. We may never know. The evidence is gone. The witnesses are dead. The bones have vanished. All that remains is a name painted on walls, a question with no answer, and the memory of 4 boys who climbed a tree in Hagley Wood in 1943 and discovered that some secrets refused to stay buried. This has been Cold Vault. Subscribe for more cases the world forgot to solve.